again together with Angel Ascunia and Sarah Patricia Torres. And today we're going to discuss about the context and content analysis on President Corazon Aquino's speech during the joint session of the U.S. Congress in September 18, 1986.
Good day everyone, I am Marcus Salascunya and I am one of the member of Group 6, and for today's video I'm going to tackle about the Corazon Aquino speech before the US Congress. But first, let me introduce to you who is President Corazon Aquino. Okay, so Corazon Aquino or Maria Corazon Sumulong Cuangco Aquino was born on January 25, 1933 in Tarlac, Philippines. She was enrolled in law school in Manila where she met his husband Benigno Aquino Jr. She is the 11th president and first female president of the Philippines and in Asia. She was also dubbed as the mother of democracy. She died on August 1, 2009. So, going back to the topic, which is the Corazon Aquino speech before the U.S. Congress, Mr. Speaker, Senator Thurmond, distinguished members of Congress, 3 years ago I left America in grief to bury my husband, Ninoy Aquino. I thought I had left it also to lay to rest his restless dream of Filipino freedom. Today I have returned as the president of a free people. And burying Ninoy, a whole nation honored him by that brave and selfless act of giving honor to a nation in shame recovered its own. A country that had lost faith in its future, founded in a faithless and brazen act of murder. So, in giving we receive, in losing we find, and out of defeat we snatched our victory. For the nation, Ninoy became the pleasing sacrifice that answered their prayers for freedom. For myself and our children, Ninoy was loving husband and father. His loss 3 times in our lives was always a deep and painful one. 14 years ago this month was the first time we lost him. A president turned dictator and traitor to his oath, suspended the Constitution and shut down the Congress that was much like this one before which I am honored to speak. He detained my husband along with thousands of other senators, publishers, and anyone who had spoken up for the democracy at its end drew near. But for Ninoy, a long and a cruel ordeal was reserved. The dictator was already know that Ninoy was not a body merely to be imprisoned but a spirit he must break. For even as the dictatorship demolished one by one the institutions of democracy, the press, the Congress, the independence of a judiciary, the protection of the Bill of Rights, Ninoy kept their spirit alive in himself. The government sought to break him by indignities and terror. They locked him up in a tiny airless cell in a military camp in the north. They stripped him naked and held a threat of a sudden midnight execution over his head. Ninoy held up manfully under all of it. I barely did as well. 43 days, the authorities would not tell me what had happened to him. This was the first time my children and I had lost him. When that didn't work, they put him on trial for subversion, murder, and a host of other crimes before a military commission. Ninoy challenged its authority and went on a fast. If he survived it, then he felt God intended him for another fate. We had lost him again, for nothing would hold him back from his determination to see his fast to the end. He stopped only when it dawned on him that the government would keep his body alive after the fast had destroyed his brain. And so, with barely any life in his body, he called off the fast on 40th day. God meant him for other things. He felt he did not know that an early death would still be his fate, that only the timing was wrong. At any time during his long ordeal, Ninoy could have made a separate peace with a dictatorship as so many of his countrymen had done. But the spirit of democracy has inherent in our race and animates this chamber could not be allowed to die. He held out in the loneliness of his cell and the frustration of exile, the democratic alternative to the insatiable greed and mindless cruelty of the right and purging holocaust of the left. And then, we lost him irrevocably and more painfully than in the past. The news came to us in Boston. It had to be after the 3 happiest years of our lives together. But his death was my country's resurrection in the courage and faith by which alone they could be free again. The dictator had called him a nobody, yet 2 million people threw aside their passivity and fear and escorted him to his grave. And so began the revolution that has brought me to democracy's most famous home, the Congress of the United States. The task had fallen on my shoulders to continue offering the democratic alternative to our people. Archibald MacLeish had said that democracy must be defended by arms when it attacks by arms. And with the truth, when it is attacked by lies, he failed to say how it shall be won. I held fast to Ninoy's conviction that it must be by the ways of democracy. I held out for participation in the 1984 election dictatorship called even if I know it would be rigged. I was warned by the lawyers of the opposition that I ran the grave risk of legitimizing the foregone results. Elections that were clearly going to be fraudulent, but I was not fighting for lawyers, but for the people in whose intelligence. I had implicit faith by the exercise of democracy, even dictatorship. They would be prepared for democracy when it come. And then also, it was the only way I know by which we could measure our power even in the terms dictated by dictatorship. The people vindicated me in an election shamefully marked by government thuggery and fraud. The opposition swept the elections, garnering a clear majority of the votes, even if they ended up, thanks to corrupt commission on elections, with barely a third of the seats in parliament. Now I know our power. Based on what I have read about the speech of Corazon Aquino before the US Congress, and in my own opinion, I think it's all about the death of your husband. Someone is killing you, maybe, and I think, yes, someone is killing you, and I don't know the person literally, but I think kanang gipakuan siya, kanang mga gipasuffer siya about 40 days. Ano ito? Oh, yeah. I think someone is betraying on her husband's side. Yes, on his husband niya. Someone is dictatorship as well. Sa wala na mga tao. Thank you.
The speech was delivered by Corazon Aquino on September 18, 1986. That was after the EDSA People Power Revolution when Marcos was ousted, and here comes Corazon Aquino assuming the presidency. She went to the United States in the US Congress and delivered this particular speech. Particularly, Corazon Aquino had no experience with politics, unlike former Senator Benigno Aquino. So, if we were going to compare between Corazon Aquino and Marcos, was that really Marcos was well experienced and well-rounded about politics, where Corazon Aquino was not. It was Benigno Aquino who was well-rounded also about politics. However, Ninoy Aquino was assassinated. And so, here comes the cry of people. The cry of people na need labanan or fight ang dictatorship ni Marcos. That is one of the advocacy ni Corazon Aquino. That's why during the snap election, Corazon Aquino ran for president against Marcos, and so there was a snap election that happened in February 1986, and it resulted with a win of President Marcos. So Corazon Aquino lost in that election, although they were claiming united kas or dayan nga nahitabo during that snap election, but we do not really know what happened. After that snap election, there were a lot of protests that happened coming from different people such as the CPP in PA, the rebels, and some of the activities were actually working out and having this plan to make a revolution. Until such time that the Archbishop of Manila, which was the Jaime Cardinal Sin, urged the people to come to the EDSA to have that People Power Revolution. So, Mauna to in People Power Revolution in 1986, it is a Catholic Church has big contribution in realizing that particular EDSA, People Power Revolution, because it was Cardinal Sin who actually taught and urged the people to, especially the Catholics to come in EDSA and Mars in order to have that People Power Revolution aiming to oust Ferdinand Marcos from presidency. So, dito na nahitabo nga ni-left si Marcos sa Malacanang Place and fled to Hawaii. And here comes Corazon Aquino assuming the presidency and so on. September 18, 1986, that was 7 months after Cory became the president, she went to the US to deliver this particular speech. So, let us now visit this speech of Cory Aquino. One of the major content speech ni Corazon Aquino was about the restoration of democracy. It was talking about the respect of freedom rights of the people and the restoration of democracy from the authoritarianism of Ferdinand Marcos. This is a controversial agenda of the speech of the Cory Aquino speech before the US Congress was about peace. The peace agenda because he was talking about the existing communist insurgency in the country. We can actually remember that during the time of Marcos, one of the reasons why Marcos declared martial law was due to the uprising, the growing numbers of the CPP in PE during his time. So, when Marcos implemented martial law, pwedeng daghanang CPP in PE nga napriso. In fact, some of them were tortured based on the historians. So, going back to the speech that will be continued to discuss by Sarah Patricia Torres.
So, my name is Sarah Patricia Torres and I will continue the reporting on Cory Aquino's speech. So, take care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow, for his orphans, do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves with all nations. Like Abraham Lincoln, I understand that force may be necessary before mercy. Like Lincoln, I don't relish it yet. I will do whatever it takes to defend the integrity and freedom of my country. Finally, may I turn to the other slavery? Our $26 billion foreign debt, I have said we shall honor it. Yet, the means by which we shall be able to do so are kept from us. Many of the conditions imposed in previous government that stole this debt continue to be imposed on us, who never benefited from it. And no assistance or liberality commensurate with the calamity that vested on us have been extended. Yet ours must have been the cheapest revolution ever. With little help from others, we Filipinos fulfilled the first and most difficult condition of the debt negotiation. The full restoration of democracy and responsible government. Elsewhere and in other times, a more stringent world economic condition, Marshall plans, and there likely felt to be necessary companions of returning democracy. When I met with President Reagan, we began an important dialogue about cooperation and the strengthening of friendships between our two countries. The meeting was both confirmation and new beginning. I am sure it will be to positive result in all areas of common concern. Today, we face the aspiration of people who have known so much poverty and massive unemployment for the past 14 years, and yet offer their lives for obstruction of democracy. Whenever I went in the campaign, slum area or impoverished village, they come to me with one cry: democracy. Not food, although they clearly needed it, but democracy. Not work, although they surely wanted it, but democracy. Not money, for they give what little they had to my campaign. They didn't expect me to work a miracle that would instantly put food into their mouths, clothes on their backs, education in their children, and give them work that will put dignity in their lives. But I feel the pressing obligation to respond quickly as the leader of people who deserving of all these things. We face a communist insurgency that feels on economic deterioration, even as we carry a great share of the free world defenses in Pacific. These are only two of many burdens my people carry, even as they try to build a worthy and enduring house for new democracy that may serve as well as a redoubt for freedom in Asia. Yet no sooner is one stone laid than two are taken away. Half our export earnings, $2 billion out of $4 billion, which is all we can earn in restricted market of the world, must go pay just interest on a debt whose benefited the Filipino whenever they receive, people never receive. Still we fought for honor, and if only for honor we shall pay. And yet, should we have to wring the payments from sweat of our men's faces, and sink all the wealth piled by bondsmen 250 years of unrepeated toil. Yet to all Americans, as a leader to a proud and free people, I address this question: has there been a greater test of national commitment to the ideals you hold dear than that my people have gone through? You have spent many lives and much treasure to bring freedom to many lands that were reluctant to receive it. And here you have a people who want it by themselves and need only the help to preserve it.
So, Cory Aquino's US speech kay usa siya sa importanteng event in terms of political and diplomatic history sa ato ang bansa, which is Philippines. Timao ni ang nagcemented sa pag-legalize sa EDSA government. She talks about, in her speech, sadly, she talks about her family's background, especially sa life ni Ninoy Aquino, isa iyang husband. Kung ngano siyang gipriso og pila ka tuig, og ang iyang sacrifice og ang iyang pagkamatay naghinungdan sa demonstration sa mga tao na nag-lead sa EDSA revolution. Her personal perception on the revolution and as president also represents what the dominant discourse was at that point in our history. The ideology or the principle of new democratic government. Cory Aquino was able to draw the sharp contrast between her government and her predecessor by expressing her commitment to democratic constitution. Drafted by independent commission, she also hoisted herself as reconciliatory agent, sort of bridge after more than 20 years of authoritarian rule. For example, ato iyang claim atong pag sa iyang pamahala kay atong pag-blown up sa communist insurgency as product of repressive and corrupt government. Her claim that her main approach to these problems is by through peace, not by through sword, or meaning war. So, despite sa mga effort ni Cory na exact opposite lagi siya ni Marcos, sa iyang speech sa US kay still ni-revealed na naa siya'y pagka-similarities ni Marcos, which is ang pag-continue sa alliance between sa Amerika o sa Philippines. The Aquino regime, as seen in Cory's acceptance of an invitation to address the U.S. Congress, and to the content of the speech, decided to build and continue with the alliance between the Philippines and the United States, and effectively implemented an essentially similar foreign policy to that of the dictatorship. For example, ato kay katong katong utang ni Marcos sa US kay wala jud na benefit sa mga Filipino people. So si Cory in her speech expressed that there was a choice of waiving, so her intention to pay of those debts. Unknown to many Filipinos was the fact that there was a choice that the said debt because those were the debt of the dictator and not of the country. Cory's decision is an indicator of her government's intention to carry on a debt-driven economy.